So when I first originally heard this, I was obviously very much in shock. In so much shock that I was like, I got to get out the notepad and start jotting down some ideas for a potential video. Because for those of you who don't know, according to Tom Morris, of course, on SCN, the Sydney Swans are expected to target the 2025 AFL free agency and trade period pretty heavily. Again, whatever your thoughts and opinions are on Tom Morris, whether you like the guy or whether you very much dislike the guy, it's like no one can doubt that this guy has a lot of sources and a lot of really reliable people in his phone that he of course can talk to. It's like the guy has more contacts in his phone than what two phones Marbia Chol probably does. And look, actually, that might have been a little bit of an exaggeration, but you guys kind of get where I'm going with this. Tom Morris, of course, actually went on SCN and described the Sydney Swans as going into this trade period that's coming up, obviously, and described them as being very, very aggressive from what he's heard. And in his words, he says they are going to be ruthless and ambitious, which is definitely very, very crazy. And what's even weirder about that is he actually mentioned a ton of names that I wanted to talk about in today's video on who he thinks the Sydney Swans could potentially target, as well as he mentioned, again, not only were these guys players that they were going to target, some of them were potential upcoming free agents, but of course a lot of them actually had a year left on their deal, really just showing that they're not just going after players whose contracts have expired. They are truly going for pretty much everyone and their dad. Again, I've even thrown some names in here later on that I'm going to talk about that I think Sydney should actually possibly target, because again, if we're being realistic with ourselves right now, it's very obvious, I think, that Sydney are going to target the free agency and trade period. But I think it was a little bit shocking to the names that Tom Morris has, of course, mentioned. Again, they need a lot of players. They are half the team that they were last year. Again, watching some of the backmen that they have is really no good. Their key forwards don't look anywhere near as good as what they were last year. Brodie Grundy's half the player he was last year. They're playing Peter Laddams with him. Again, they're going to go pretty big. And I think we'll start off with the names that he's mentioned, right? And we'll start off with them in order of, I think, least likely to most likely. Again, he said they're going to basically go after a ton of players, even if they are contracted, one of which being potentially Harley Reid. He said they will ask the question about Harley Reid. He's not saying they're going to get Harley Reid, but he said they will ask, and it's obviously going to be no. He's either going to stay in Western Australia or he's going to go home back to Victoria. So I think we can rule that out. Again, Sydney can ask. There's no harm in asking, but of course this is not going to happen. I mean, that's an obvious one. I think the other one for me is Ben King. He mentioned Ben King's name, and I just can't see how that's going to happen. Again, why would Ben King want to leave Gold Coast, especially with what they are building right now? And if he was to leave Gold Coast, I would assume it would be to go home to Victoria. Again, the only team I can see Ben King leaving Gold Coast for is Collingwood. And from what we know, Collingwood are not going to assert their interest in him until next year, when they maybe regroup together some more assets to actually make that, potential move happen. So I can't see Ben King getting to Sydney. I think you can rule that one out. The other one, which is a tiny bit more likely, but I'm not too sure, it's going to come down to the money, I think, for this player. And that does happen to be Aaron Cadman. Again, his name was mentioned. He has 1 year left on his deal. He is actually from Melbourne, I believe, but as we know, when he did the interviews for the Giants, he was extremely happy to move anywhere. And I think, obviously, watching him play at GWS and just from the background noise that we have heard, I don't think he actually does want to go home. I don't think that is really a factor at all. So if Sydney truly think that Aaron Cadman is going to be a target that they can maybe go out and get, I think they're going to offer him money. They're going to, poach him with the idea of being the number one key forward. Again, he can't have that right now because of Jesse Hogan at the Giants. But at the end of the day, I can't really see that one either, because I think Giants will be saying to him, look, when you're ready to be the number one key forward in 2 to 3 years, Jesse Hogan will be, starting to slow down by then anyway. So I don't think, I can't see that one happening, although that was an idea brought up. But the player I can see, right? And I actually sat there, watching Bridget Jones' Diary or whatever, and I had to turn that shit off to really focus and lock in and really think about, could this player actually go to the Sydney Swans if he was offered a massive deal and a massive opportunity? And the more and more I actually started to think about it, the more and more I think that Tom Morris might actually be cooking with this one. And that does happen to be Charlie Kerno. Again, we don't know what is going on with the Carlton Football Club right now. I mean, Carlton are having a very similar problem to what Sydney are having, right? Where they are completely half the team that they were last year. But I think the difference between Carlton and Sydney, in my opinion, is that I think Sydney just need to fill in 4 or 5 spots like they did a couple years ago, and they'll automatically be back into grand final contention pretty soon. But in my opinion, with Carlton, I think even if they do fill in a couple spots, I think issues are just going to keep arising. As we know, Tom De Koning is supposed to leave this year, and for next year, Sam Walsh is getting apparently massive offers from other teams to maybe leave as well. And that's only just the beginning of things. I think there could be really a big domino effect if these players start to leave the Blues, or maybe other players going. While again, Sydney, they don't have anyone leaving. Their players have just regressed, right? Their players have just regressed, and they're going to be looking to hit the trade period and free agency to top up those players. Again, when you think about it, Charlie Kerno actually makes a lot of sense, because if Tom De Koning does leave this year, which he will, and the Blues don't think they are going to be able to get back to where they think they'll be, they think that, a Sam Walsh could very likely leave as well, and a couple other players might leave. I'm not saying they're going to trade Charlie Kerno, because you'd have to give up a hell of a lot. Because again, this guy is arguably the best key forward in the game when he's on. But you would have to listen to offers. You would be kind of naive not to listen to what Sydney have to offer, especially considering their first round pick is supposed to be top 5. And I genuinely believe they're going to look to trade it, because as we know, they've got a guy who's projected pick 6 right now. His name is Max King. Very similar to the Max King who's in the AFL right now. Same name, very similar height, except this guy's actually an inside midfielder. Again, some people believe a team like Richmond could actually do the nasty and bid on him really, really high, meaning that if Richmond were to bid on him at pick 3, Sydney would lose their pick 5, I believe, in, matching those picks, and the AFL would just take it off him again. It's why so many teams like Gold Coast have tried to trade out of their first rounders, and they were so willing to give up their first round picks for Daniel Rioli last year. That is because, it does happen like that. And I think Sydney, they'll be thinking this. They'll know Richmond are going to be ruthless, and they'll probably bid on the guy, and then they're going to have to match it. I think it could be very interesting, and we could be getting to a situation where Sydney may be looking at Carlton and saying, look, we'll give you pick 5, we'll give you a future first round pick, and probably a player would get thrown in, and maybe even a later pick or something like that. I don't know. It would be a mega trade, right? It'd be a massive trade, and they could try and get Charlie Kerno. And the thing is, when you look at Sydney, in my opinion, I think they need a key back or two. They need a key forward. They need an inside ball midfielder, I think. And I honestly believe they need a new ruckman, but that's probably not their main issue. When you think about it, 2 of those things get answered already. Charlie Kerno, the key forward, and of course Max King, the inside ball midfielder, who some people believe is the most ready player in this upcoming draft, who could come in and make an immediate impact to the Swans. So those are 2 guys that they'll be looking at, obviously, right there. Again, another guy who has been brought up has been Jamar Uglehagen. Of course, as we know, the Western Bulldogs are going to be moving on from Jamara. I think a lot of teams are expecting they're going to get him for free if they could try, if they wanted to sign him. I think his contract could very well get terminated. If not, he'll be dealt for a 3rd or a 4th round pick at this rate because, again, he has no value in the league anymore because the Dogs don't even want him on their team. They're already pretty much part ways with him. Again, Sydney are apparently the front runner, and I genuinely believe whether they get Charlie Kerno or not, right, it's very low chance they do get Kerno, but they're going to ask whether they get him or not. Jamar Uglehagen would be a guy that would make a ton of sense as well, because you desperately need, I think, a key forward to come into this team, and we've seen how great they've been in developing players for many, many years. Jamar could be the guy that comes in, right? And you could basically get him for free. And I think he would be a really good option. I think he'd actually be a better player if they brought in Charlie Kerno as well, because there's not as much pressure on Jamara. But again, the chance of them getting Kerno is probably like a 10%. I still think Carlton will hold on to him no matter what. They're going to be stubborn about it. But I don't know what Carlton's future is going to be. And we're really going to have to wait and see how that, of course, all does unfold. But I can't see why a guy like Kerno wouldn't go to Sydney as well. I mean, as I said, I think they just need to get these couple of players in to fill the boxes, and they'll be right back up there again. And they can offer apparently a ton of money. According to Tom Morris, they have a ton of salary cap, which I don't really know how, but I guess a lot of their players have been expiring, like probably Taylor Adams. They're not really paying Grundy anything at all. So yeah, there'll be a couple of those deals that end up expiring, right? Again, one of the players I want to throw in that I actually think would be elite for Sydney to target and a really cheap option would actually be Jacob Blight from the Richmond Football Club. Again, it's kind of crazy how good Richmond's backline actually is. I mean, when you look at their bench, it's probably a bottom 3 in the league. Their forward line's definitely a bottom 3 in the league. It's so young. Their midfield's probably a bottom 3. But the realistic thing is that their backline is, I think, a top 8 backline by quite a fair bit, and on their good day, they sometimes are like a top 4 backline. I mean, the fact is they've been one of the main reasons Richmond have won 3 games and have competed in like the other 3. The thing is, you got guys like Jacob Blight who are actually really good players not getting a game because their backline is so solidified and so good. And we've already heard little rumours that the Perth clubs are going to be going after Jacob Blight. I actually think Jacob Blight would automatically come in and be a really good defender for Sydney. I mean, Dane Rampey's half the player he used to be. Joel Hamling got moved up forward. He was so bad down back. I think they really desperately need a key defender. And the reality is that Jacob Blight is not a really young guy. He's a guy who should be heading into his prime at 23 to 24 years of age, which would perfectly fit their timeline. And you could probably get him for like an early 3rd round pick. So we could be looking at this really perfect world for the Sydney Swans, right? Where they trade up all these picks and they get Charlie Kerno in, they get Jamara in, the 2 key forwards they really need. They draft their inside bull midfielder in Max King, and then they go out and trade for a defender like Jacob Blight. Again, you can't tell me that those 4 additions wouldn't already springboard them into being in top 8 already, right? And if I think they improve their backline yet again, maybe added another guy, they could be in literal grand final contentions. Again, it's not like it's not something Sydney would do. It was literally 2 years ago where they added in, Taylor Adams, Brodie Grundy, Hamling, and who was the other guy? I think it was James Jordan, were the 4 inclusions that they, of course, had. Again, imagine if this year it was like Kerno, Blight, Jamara, and Max King through the draft. That would be absolutely insane. I mean, I feel like we're playing NBA 2K here, and we're playing My League, but this is a lot of the stuff that Tom Morris has said, and a lot of stuff that really could happen. I think a lot of it would be interesting, and I mean, Charlie Kerno could actually get more money to go play for Sydney on a team that should be a lot better than where he is right now. And I honestly think if they got Charlie Kerno, geez, watch out. Like, that could be really the difference. So, again, there's a lot of ifs and buts. We've got to see where Carlton are really going. I don't even know at this point. We'll definitely have to wait and see. Again, I'd very much like to hear all of your thoughts and opinions down below, though, on who you guys think Sydney might target in the free agency, the trade period, all of the above. Again, let me know your thoughts and opinions down below. Subscribe to my gaming channel, which will be linked down below. This channel as well for latest sports content and news. And I guess I'll be seeing you guys next time. Goodbye.